Nice to see you all here. Nice to see all new members and stuff. And good people, you here last time, weren't you? Yeah, last the new members. So we got a few new members here. So welcome, welcome, welcome. And those who aren't members, you know where we are now. You can't escape us. We're watching. So thanks for coming around, everyone. Just a reminder, afterwards we do have supper. Once again, a lot of people got a hot drink now, which is great, but there's some supper as well. So help us out. It's always nice to have a chat and that as well. So tonight, without further ado, we're very, very lucky and privileged to have our guest speaker here, Professor Rino, who's a professor at Massey University and also an amateur astronomer since 2020. So he's here to talk today about DIY astronomy, how to be a pro on a low budget. So I think it's going to be a fascinating talk. So without further ado, we give him a huge, warm, hibiscus coast welcome.
Thank you for having me here. If I move a bit and walk a bit like in an odd way, it's just because I got injured myself last week. I can't play with the dog, and I realized I'm getting old. So I'm running on Panadol. So I'm a bit sleepy, but I'll try to be funny today. I didn't prepare much jokes, so if you get offended, I'm Italian, I don't care. So it's gonna be fun. You can always sue the society. So today I'm gonna give you a bit of overview of what has been my journey since 2020 and how I started doing astronomy with the blessing of my wife. She's the business manager at home. So whenever I need to buy something, I need to go there with a business case and prove that it's gonna be worthless. And so I'm gonna show you a bit what I've done and what are a bit of the experience, and especially if you have never had a telescope, where to start. And then always ought to be careful not to fall in the rabbit hole of astrophotography, because it can be like starting by the first boat and then you end up with a yacht that you can afford. And of course, it's not working. This. Okay, so too many click. Let's click back. So I'm originally from Italy, so that's why you will see me using a lot of my hands. Farming family, all my family is basically, most of them, the 90% of them, they are still working farms. We used to produce wine, now peaches, now mix of them. So I have a really good experience. If you have any issues with grapes and stuff like that, come and give me a call. I can give you a lot of good advice how to do good wine. Since a kid, I've been fascinated about astronomy. I loved it. Most of you were there when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. I was too late. So you're the lucky one. I missed out the party. But I was fascinated by the possibility to travel in the space. I was like a big fan of NASA, still big fan of NASA, and still dreaming to work for them. One day I'm gonna find the excuse to work with them. I still try to find my way in. And the problem is because although I was really fascinated about astrophysics, astronomy, I never managed to study that stuff because it was too far from my home place. Any university were giving their class, space engineering was even too far. And eventually I decided, let's see if we can make it work. Okay. I decided to study civil engineering. So that's the reason, was like, at least it's gonna be easy to find a job. So I finished my master right after the 2008 financial crisis. No job. But I was lucky enough that towards the end of my PhD, I discovered a new field, fire engineering. That is a branch within civil engineering, which we try to understand how fire spread inside building and how people evacuate from building. And so that's became then eventually my job. It has been studying how people evacuate from building, and this is just a simulation to give an idea how I waste my time at the university. And you pay for it, by the way. Thank you for paying your taxes and funding this research. Joking apart, this has been part of my PhD, and then I became a more expert in virtual reality, augmented reality, how to use this new technology to save life, to train people and save life. And we are doing a lot of exciting things with Massey. So the story was that I ended up coming New Zealand here to work at the University of Auckland for 1 year and a half. So I told my mother, don't worry, I'm going to be back in 1 year and a half. That was 2016. I didn't keep the promise, and she's always reminding me that that wasn't the deal. But end up working also a bit in NIST. Looks like NASA, but it's not the same. It's still in US, and it's the big agency, government agency, where most of the research was done. It was important for me to be there. For instance, this investigation of the World Trade Center evacuation was done at NIST. The big investigation of why the Twin Tower collapsed was done at NIST. They didn't have a lab when they started the investigation, so they built a lab to do the investigation. And the lab is still there with the pieces of the World Trade Center collapsed pins. So then when I was at NIST, I finally received a permanent position at Massey University as a lecturer, and I got stuck there since, and having a lot of fun doing a lot of cool things with virtual reality, augmented reality, simulation. And we can say the top, not in New Zealand, but probably in the world in what we do in my field. In fact, we have people from all around the world coming and working with us. I started my astronomy journey in 2020 because of COVID. To be honest, at the beginning, I was getting sick at home of doing nothing, so I tried to make cheese. Then I realized that it was too expensive to buy good milk to make a mozzarella. And then I realized it's much cheaper to buy the mozzarella. Let's find something else to do in life. And so I still remember the first day I was on TradeMe bidding for a telescope and asking my wife, it's about $400. I don't know if I want to buy. It's getting a bit too expensive. And eventually, come on, it's $430, go. And that was the start of the madness. I started with the first telescope, and then I got with within a couple of 1 year probably with I couldn't even count how many telescopes they were at home because I was fixing them, giving them away, and do more and more. So a bit of history of telescopes, if you never heard about telescopes. Everything started 400 years ago. It was not even Galileo. If you think Galileo invented the telescope, no. It was invented in Holland. And the story, I don't know if it's a story tale, we start using lenses because we start printing the Bible. And we had a standard to understand if you weren't able to see things. And then people start realizing, if you put a piece of glasses, you can start getting things better. And then there was that guy that said, let's try to put them one in front of each other. We can magnify, we can zoom in. Galileo basically took the idea and make it more performing. So his first telescope was 10 times better than the first one. And he had the silly idea to point it upwards and start looking the space. We know what happened. Everything changed. And if you go in Florence, you can still see the original telescope. You might think that he had that massive telescope. It's just something like this size, tiny telescope. With that telescope, because the lens manufacturer was really cheap and not possible to do a really high definition, he couldn't even figure it out that Saturn had rings. He thought it was like just satellites going around. And the other beautiful thing, if you go in the museum, is that they keep also the middle finger of Galileo. Italians. We do it with saints. We have bits and pieces of saints in all the church. They decide to do it with Galileo finger, the middle finger. And when I was there, the funny thing, there was a university professor from US, and he was asking me, do you think he's pointing towards the Vatican City? Because there was a bit of mess. And we learned a lot that sometimes we need to learn to put aside science and mythology and religion. And this is something that is a worry that is it's become more and more a worry for me here in New Zealand when I see that people try to mix too much science and religion. They are both good. It's like you put Nutella on a nice margherita, not good at all. They need to stay separate. So the Galileo telescope worked like that. He gets a beam of light, and then he focused towards the other lens, and that's how you get the magic. You get something that gets zoom in. If we go ahead, there were other revolution. The second revolution was from Newton. He realized that we can just do something much more efficient just using glasses, no lenses. And it's much easier to manufacture bigger glasses and get much more performing telescope. So if you see a Newtonian telescope, we call them still Newtonian, they work that they get beam of lights, they shoot it on the first mirror that we call primary mirror, then they go on the second mirror and then boom, in your eye. One of the most famous telescope for me, of course, there are so many, you can mention all of them. Those are the one meaningful for me. This is the 100-inch Newtonian telescope used by Hubble in the US, and it was really important in the human history because we started figuring it out that there were other galaxies. We weren't alone. They were much more fun to see outside our Milky Way. So all this much that we couldn't figure it out, they were other galaxies. And then we started figuring out they were getting away from us. Contrary with the Andromeda, that seems that it wants to crash against us. But don't worry, it's really unlikely that we are going to crash against anyone else. In terms of manufacturing, another beautiful invention is the Schmidt telescope. Schmidt-Cassegrain, you've been probably hearing. That is a generation of telescope that is combining lenses and mirrors. The good things about these telescopes is that you can get something that is, for instance, if you have a telescope that is 2.5 meters focal length, if you have a Newtonian, it needs to have a 2-meter length. If you start using something like this, you can compensate and pack everything in something much smaller and easy to carry around. So that's why it's, I think it's one really beautiful design. So in this case, you can see that the lights go through the lens, then it goes to a first mirror, second mirror, and then shoot down. I really like Dobson because he took things that were too expensive and tried to make it super cheap and affordable for everyone else. So although he didn't invent anything super advanced, he did something simple that made astronomy affordable for many people like us. So it's one of the good fathers or godfathers, let's talk in the Italian, of DIY astronomy. And this is his design, really simple. You can spin the telescope around this axis, on the other axis, super easy to use and to start learning with it. And of course, the two telescopes that made history, Hubble telescope. And by the way, when they send it on the space, it's funny to see that they turn it on, they took the first shot, gosh, it's not working. Thank goodness it was really close to Earth, so they could send a crew with the space shuttle and fix it. But they realized that if we screw it up with this one, this is going to be a big problem. So with the James Webb telescope, they make sure that they try multiple times because this telescope is pretty far away from Earth. So you can't send easily a crew to fix it. And it's probably one of the most beautiful pieces of engineering ever built by human. Just thinking the craziness of how it was deployed, open and pumped, is working the first shot is something unbelievable, and it can take picture from almost the beginning of time. It's wow. So if you try to buy a telescope, there are two types of mounts that you will end up looking at. alt ads, and it's basically what you find with a classic telecamera, DSLR camera, that it moves one direction and is spinning in the other direction. And the equatorial one is the mount that looks really fancy, and it's much more a pain in the ass to put it, because you need to align this axis with the south. And in the Southern Hemisphere, we missed out with a bright star right there. If you go in the Northern Hemisphere, you have the Northern Star. In the Southern Hemisphere, it became much more challenging to find it. Roughly, you can figure it out where it is. And what does it mean? This is a simple animation that shows what happened if you use one or the other. So if you use an equatorial mount and you start looking within the telescope, you will see that the image doesn't rotate. So if you keep following an object, the object is always in the same direction, doesn't start rotating. Instead, if you do the same and you keep following an object with this kind of mount, you start seeing that as you go with the time, the things start rotating. And this became a big issue if you want to do pictures. And we are going to go there in a few seconds. Most of the pictures that we take with telescope are long exposure. That means that they need 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes. And if this movement starts happening, you will see that the star is not any longer a dot. It starts becoming an arch. And so you lose the possibility to have a nice picture. That's why equatorial mounts are really popular, especially when you need to take pictures. If you want to do visual astronomy, much easier, especially to start. If you want to start doing some astrophotography, then you need to start thinking what you want to go for. The big telescope that we have from our nature is our eye. It's really, and I put this presentation, if you go and see this presentation, is beautiful, one of the most beautiful presentation about astrophotography, and it's by a PhD that has developed one of the most popular software that we use in astrophotography that he released for free. Basically, our eye is basically 22 millimeter focal length, and it's too small here. Aperture, our opening of the eye, is 7 millimeter roughly. And then you can see that to get any signal in the brain to see that you see something, you need 1,000 photons per second. So it's, in other words, if you know anything about lighting and sensor, it's pretty bad. That's why we are not capable to see the wonder of nature around us. And most of the time, even if you are capable to see something, you need half an hour to get chemically adjusted to see something in the dark sky. So there are people that even put patches on their eyes for half an hour so they can appreciate the dark sky. So that's why when you go out from your home, you might need a bit of time to adjust and start seeing something up there. It's so bad that we can even appreciate Andromeda. Many people think that things in the sky are too far away, so we don't see them. The problem is that they are big, but they are too faint. They don't emit enough light that can be captured with our eye. So if we were able to see and appreciate with capturing and be more performing with our eyes, we would have been able to see the the Andromeda galaxy 4 times bigger than. So it's pretty huge. And if you want to see other example, this is our moon, Andromeda. Matariki is massive, but we don't see anything of this. We can see here, what else? And Orion Nebula, and it's one of the brightest nebulas. Still, we don't see it. Same size of the moon. So there is all this beauty out there, and the eye can capture it. And this slide is really good, and I wish someone was giving me this picture, because the most common mistake that everyone does, they buy a telescope and they try to zoom as much as possible. So they start to put really wrong eyepieces in the wrong lens, because they think I need to zoom in, otherwise I won't see anything. And then they put it, I don't see anything. Of course, you're zooming in too much. So that's the common things that everyone does, me included. It's fine with the moon because you get closer to the moon and the moon is super bright. Otherwise, not gonna work. It's gonna work if you're looking at the planets because they are super bright. And this is a picture that I took from the internet just to give you a context on the size of the planet, the apparent size of the planets. Because of course they have different size, but this is the size that you will appreciate from the Earth. In that case, you really need to zoom in. And so you need a really big telescope if you want to go and see the details of those planets. This is just an example done with my own telescope, the big boy that I have at home. Just to give an example, the planets weren't there. If they were there in that position, it means there is something wrong. It's impossible to have this kind of alignment. I just take them separately and just put them together just to get a sense of the apparent size of them. Of course, Jupiter is the biggest planet that we have in the solar system, but doesn't look that big because it's pretty far away. So, in other words, that's what a telescope is. It's a bucket of light. We use telescope because help us to capture as much light as possible, so we can get much more information in our eyes, so we can see much more. So instead of having a small aperture of 7 millimeter, we basically cheat and have something that can be 3 meters as well of mirror that concentrate all the light in a small spot. That's why things then became visible. And it's the same also with sensors that we use to take pictures. That's the trick. Other common mistake. I want to buy a telescope. Then you go to your wife or husband and you ask for the 40-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain. Not always the bigger, the better. It depends on what you're looking at. If you want to see the planets, probably a really big telescope is going to do the job. If you want to see most of the wonderful galaxy and now galaxy, probably you will need something intermediate. But if you want to see nebula and a lot of fancy things that are already in the Milky Way, you don't need something that is so big and expensive. And this is going to be used against me by my wife one day. So those are the first. This is one of my first telescope. This is the really first one. It was a 8-inch. The 8-inch is the main mirror. It's a Newtonian, so no lenses, made of cardboard, which is good because metal change size. So if you focus on something and then you put it outside, by the time you adjust with the temperature, out of focus. So it's good that it's cardboard. It's not just cheap, but it's also good. And this is, you might recognize my wife looking at the moon. And she was telling me, you can just see the moon. You can't see anything else with this. And then I proved her wrong with Venus. So, yeah, but it looks still like the moon. In fact, fair enough. So the second telescope that I bought, it was the Celestron 6-inch SI. And this because was my dream since I was a teenager. I was really close to buy one of these when I was before going to the university as a prize for my graduation high school. But then eventually I said, I'm not gonna have time and use it. So eventually I found it to one secondhand. And by the way, secondhands never bought something new. All from Trade Me. So I started using it and I started getting a lot of fun with it. I sold both of them and I'm regretting a bit. So the first project that I did, it was to create a setup for this telescope. It's called wedge. So this telescope can also work like equatorial telescopes. So in this case, you need to put this axis aligned with the south pole, and then you have that compensate with just one rotation, the rotation of Earth, so you can start taking some pictures. I didn't start doing a lot of pictures since then, I was just trying to challenge myself. It was the really good reason to buy my first hand tool in New Zealand and became like a kingfish. Now I have too many tools. I bought my circular saw because I wanted to start cutting stuff and start put together these things. And now if you come at home, I have so many saw things, too much. Then I started buying the first camera. It was one of the cheapest. I went too cheap, and this is the results. You can see that the sensor was a mess. It was giving a really false colors like purple, green, and my mother was asking, is that the color of the moon? No. I went just too cheap with the sensor. So I decided anyway to keep doing this stuff. And this is my first picture with the Celestron, with Jupiter and Saturn. And if you're an expert in astrophotography, it looks like pretty bad. But still, I'm super proud. And by the way, I still remember the day that I woke up at 5 a.m. in the morning to go and see Jupiter with my really first telescope and Saturn, and go inside the house. It was middle of the winter. Tell my wife, stop, do you want to come and see? You can imagine the F word. She told me, it's like, just leave me alone. And Matt has been a good friend because he discovered that I was just starting, and he offered to do a Skype call. He's based in Wellington. And we had a talk, and he showed me a bit of software, how he was using his software. So since then, I call him Professor Planets or Professor Jupiter, because we have been friends since there. We met after a couple of years when eventually I managed to go back in Wellington, visit Wellington again, and we had a lot of talk about astronomy. So eventually, I decided to invest a bit of more money, another 100 New Zealand dollars, to get one of the first ZW camera. It was like the cheapest, of course, that they were there. But you can see that just doing a bit of more investment, things started becoming more and more clear. And of course, with a bit of training and help from friends. And this is one of the best Saturn picture that I got, which is good, but you can even get better than this. The problem is that you reach a limit in which the atmosphere count. And we are in a place in New Zealand in which there is too much happening up there. And you really need to have still atmosphere to have a really sharp picture. In fact, there are a lot of crazy people that they take their telescope to the Barbados just to take picture high resolution of Saturn and Jupiter. That's their hobby. Eventually, I guess they have a lot of money as well to invest. And this kind of imaging is called lucky imaging. That means that it's not a shot. This is the results of a video of thousands of pictures. And because we zoom too much, you will start seeing that all the wobbling if you watch the video. So these results is basically done with a software that try to get all the best frames in which the atmosphere was a bit slightly still and put all together. In fact, you will see that there are a bit of lines that don't make sense. It's all artifacts because it's impossible to take a picture like this of a planet from the Earth. That's why it was important to send the Hubble outside the atmosphere, because you get out of all these problems. That's why we have a lot of telescopes outside the atmosphere, because our atmosphere is a mess when you need to zoom in too much. The other extreme, it's when you start using, you want to take picture of nebula. In that case, you need to lose long exposure. And this is relatively easy to do. This was done with a telescope, with the orange telescope I was showing you, using just a simple DSLR camera. This is one of the first DSLR camera that I bought. Also in that case, then I started buying too many and cracking some of them. And it's beautiful because most of those cameras, you just buy an adapter, $10. You put the adapter, you remove the lens, you put this adapter and you slide inside the telescope. You can get this from your backyard. And probably you already have a DSLR camera at home. Then I start going bigger. I'm telling you that it's dangerous. This was thanks to John. He's a guy from Waikato. he was selling this telescope for $600 because it was broken. It wasn't working well. The one motor was broken. So it was one of the first telescope I managed to fix, to figure it out how to make the motor working back. So I basically recycled the mount for something else, for another telescope project, but I still have this big boy. It's a 10-inch telescope. So that means that it's 25 centimeter of main mirror. And it was produced in America. It's a mid, and then they went bankrupt. It was perfect timing to get this telescope because at the end of 2020, there were two planets that were about to kiss each other. It's Jupiter and Saturn. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a really good picture because we had probably only 3 minutes because the weather that day was really awful. 3 minutes, we put the telescope, we waited, and then we got the lucky shot. Even the neighbors came and see it, and it was wonderful to see for a few seconds that the two planets were too close. And it's not going to happen anytime soon. But then I start building also in this case a wedge, bigger, because this stuff is really heavy. And this is one of the first pictures that I took. This is Carina Nebula. It's one of the most beautiful nebula. And we can see it only in the Southern Hemisphere. So you can call your friends on the North Hemisphere and say, suckers. Of course, you can start and buy more expensive stuff. This is has been my present for my, I don't remember which birthday, but I decided to buy a mount that is more professional and a telescope that was more professional to do astrophotography, then put a small telescope to start doing tracking and to advance things, and it started becoming too much. It started becoming not fun any longer because sometimes if you make it over complicated, every time you need to set it up, it takes 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And by the time you set it up and then the clouds are there, it's like, God, why? So it's fun. So yes, but no, but you can get really advanced pictures. This was during one of the latest moon eclipse. And this is a picture of Orion Nebula. That is one of my favorite one. It's the brightest, but it's, I don't know, I love that nebula. Another piece of equipment that we got is the dog, Jupiter. Don't get a dog. They hurt you physically. So basically, his name is Jove. In Italian means Jupiter, just to keep in the theme. In fact, he has the same color of Jupiter. You see the band white. It doesn't have the big red spot, but it's what it is. So it's funny because sometimes I was setting up the telescope, I was thinking everything was ready, and then I spent half an hour. What the hell? It wasn't working. You basically had to pull some cable. Don't get the dog. So it became also important for me to connect with other people. And I learned a lot. Back in the day, we were in botany, so I became a member of Oakland Astronomy Society, and there were sections in which I was learning more and more from others about telescope. And YouTube is the best place to learn. It's the place where I've been learning a lot of what I do for my research and also for astronomy. There is so much information available out there that is unbelievable what you can do. Stay away from the people that spend half an hour just to show their toys and then tell in 5 minutes what they are doing. That's astrotoxicity that they call. That is just showing off. I start building telescopes starting with this one. I got it for $5 because it was like almost destroyed. The mirror was completely gone and it was moldy. All the paint was coming off. So I told my wife, it's $5. What can go wrong, right? So I lost one of the pictures. Sorry. I wanted to show you one. I'll show you later. But you can see that basically I start pulling it apart and get it naked. So it start becoming a bit of astropornography. I don't know. And eventually it starts looking like that. This is the results of a lot of work. And the challenge was to find someone that was capable to refix the mirror. I found a company in, can't remember the area, but basically I found someone that could put a layer of silver on top of it. All the telescopes that you buy now have aluminum. To put aluminum is a pain because you need to have a chamber, you put the aluminum, then you need to heat it up, create pressure so the aluminum goes on the mirror. And it's completely different from the mirror that you have at home, because in the mirror that you have at home, you have the glass and the reflecting surface is behind the glass. For telescope, it's on the top. That's why they tell you never to touch the mirror, because all the coating is right there. So if you touch even with your finger, all the acidity of your finger might ruin the telescope. It's not really a problem with the aluminum one, but if you come and put your finger on my silver one, you will see that the day after there is a stain. And they get oxidated, the silver one, quite easily. You will see that it was super shiny, and now it's starting fading out. So I need to recoat it every 2-3 years. But I haven't done it because it's still good enough. So I have a lot of mirrors at home, because there was a lady that sold me probably 10 or 20 mirrors that needs coating because her father passed away and she wanted to give them away. So I promised her, I'll give you some money at some point when I build something out of this mirror. I'm gonna name the telescope after your dad. But it's still something that I need to do, and I still try to figure it out, a way to do silvering. It's really complicated in New Zealand because you can't import all the chemicals. But I have people in chemistry at Massey University, so I'm gonna find a way to smuggle out some silver out of it. So then I kept working on different telescopes. This is a 12-inch that it was basically in a really bad shape, all rusted. The mirror was going off, so I had to tell the spider inside, come on guys, get another house. And I managed to fix it, and this is how it started looking after it was fixed. It was like a mess. So basically, my work during COVID was rescuing the telescopes. And then I started working also on the electronics. This one was, for instance, a telescope that I didn't even know if it was still working, it was worth to repair. So I managed to find someone on Astronomy in New Zealand that had a remote that could work with this telescope. So he shipped it to me, I plug in it, I found out that it was still working. So I shipped it back the remote, and I bought a remote from the US, got it there, and rescued this other telescope. The same with this one, they didn't know what was wrong. So I bought it, I gambled it, and said, let's see if I can fix it. And I managed to figure it out that it was just the one small plug that wasn't working. Every telescope is fun because it was a new challenge. That's why I kept doing it. If you put together, I buy, resell, I made $300. If you put together all the time that I spent to fix them, probably I'm working below minimum salary wage, so I should sue myself. And most of the time, it's of the rescuing operation is just to find a way to clean them up, because they've been left in a garage, they have mold. And the recipe to clean most of the telescope, you can see here. Distilled water, never use traditional water because there is minerals. Alcohol, not the one you drink, the pure alcohol, and then a few drops of dishwashing soap. And the other suggestion is to heat up the water. It's like when you wash the dishes. Hot water makes a big difference. So I start microwaving my water. The other things that I managed to figure it out is how to modify a lot of telescopes. Most of the telescope, especially the Newtonian from old generation, if you start putting a DSLR camera right on top of it, you won't be capable to focus, because they weren't designed to work with DSLR camera. And most of the time, the trick is simple enough. It's gonna cost you $2. You buy some long screw, you put just a piece of wood that put the mirror, the primary mirror, a bit higher, put it back, calibrate, and Pam is working with DSLR camera. So a telescope that it wasn't designed like that with just a Kiwi New Zealand style adjustment. It's now with $2 capable and a whole piece of wood capable to do astrophotography. So by chance, one of my colleagues in Wellington from the Wellington Astronomy Society discovered that I was doing things. So she made a post on the newsletter. And from time to time, I have people that they still contact me because they either have issues with the telescope or like this guy had this telescope from his grandfather and that wasn't working enough. And they say, can I send it to you? Yeah. So I basically managed to open up everything and it was full of mold. It was like not lubrified enough. So I managed to fix it within a couple of hours and send it back. In this case, I did it for free. I said, if you want to pay, just buy a telescope to a person, to a teenager. That was the deal. And then I start breaking my DSLR camera. So this is one of my DSLR camera that I start opening up. And it's really nice to open up, not to break them down. Although I've done it with a couple of them, but I always buy cheap ones. So if I break them, I don't feel sorry and I don't need to justify with my boss there. So it's really good because if you open up a camera, you can remove the infrared filter that is in on the top. One of the two filters that you have in the DSLR camera is the big enemy of astrophotography, because most of the light that we have from oxygen emission, it's cut it down by this filter. So the sensor is capable to read it, but because there's this silly piece of glass that is really good for no traditional photography, it doesn't allow you to do the job. So I start opening DSLR camera to remove this filter. I managed to break 2 of them, but I managed to modify at this stage 3 or 4 of them successfully. These are 2 projects that have been there for a while. This was a vintage telescope that I bought for $10. I also did the matching paint, but it's still there, disassembled in my garage. At some point, I'm gonna do it. And this is a mount that I bought and I smashed it within a couple of months. And the problem was these yellow things. The yellow things is 3D printed in China when I was there in December with one of my students. We managed to find on the online someone that put the 3D scanning specification of that piece of that telescope. So we managed to put it, print it, put it back. I don't know if it's gonna work because still the telescope is in piece. We will see. So it's a beautiful engineering adventure as well. Sometimes try to figure it out the way to do it, and sometimes it takes quite a lot of headaches, but that's the fun. So if I was starting now to do astrophotography, probably I wouldn't start as I was doing. So we know that this is the things that you get for free, the eye. But if I was starting now, probably I would have started playing much more with a DSLR camera. I didn't have a DSLR camera. I bought a telescope and then a DSLR camera. And then I would have started playing much more with my smartphone. Because most of the smartphone that you have in your pocket can do a lot of magic. And I'm gonna show you in a few seconds. So this is one of the first shots that I did, and we were in botany. You can start seeing that with a simple DSLR camera in a simple backyard in Auckland, you can start seeing the core of the Milky Way. And that was something that I didn't know much what I was doing. It was, let's see what we can do. And once you start learning, and there are a lot of software that are out there for free, you learn all the tricks from YouTube for free, then within a couple of months, you can get this. This is in Pine Hill. I took multiple pictures of the core of the Milky Way, put them stuck together, play a bit with Photoshop. Beautiful. So most of the people think like, which telescope do you use? If you buy a DSLR like this now, second-hand, probably will cost you 300 New Zealand dollars, if not less. That's what it takes. That's why it's becoming more and more DIY. Or if you are lucky enough, like me, and you took some student to take picture of the Milky Way, but then you get the aurora of the sea, you might end up on the news. There was last year, I had a student that was really depressed. I said, okay, let's go and take some picture all together. And then we end up in Waikiki Island. Waikiki Bay. And that's what we saw. So we sent the picture to the media. And it was beautiful because we were hoping the day after was the same. But because it went to the news, there were a lot of family coming there with kids. But we didn't see the phenomenon again. But it was something like remarkable. I still remember one of my students from China. He was standing there. It's like, Rino, this is too much for me. It's like Milky Way, never seen in my life. Aurora of the sea there. It's like, what the hell is happening in our life? And the other good things that even with a DSLR camera can help you to see planets. This is Jupiter with a DSLR camera with the 300mm lens that you can buy for another $100. You point in the right direction and you see the magic. You can start looking like Galileo and see, there are some dots going around. And you can even start timing because they spin pretty fast. Smartphones. This is what you can do with long exposure. This is taken during the last aurora storm that we had in our backyard. And this is us in the Fiji. It wasn't like a shot of 1 second. We were there. We need to stay here for 15 seconds. Don't move. So we are pretending to say, look at that. So we were 50 seconds like idiots looking at the sky. And this is the results. You can really get really beautiful things. And you can do it even if you don't need to go to Fiji. You can do it in your backyard. And the core of the Milky Way is there. And it's just using a simple smartphone. Just figure it out how you can do a long exposure picture with your smartphone. And the beauty is already in your pocket. And of course, download this app. Stellarium is the place to go. You can download it on your computer, on your smartphone, in VR. That's why I brought one of these. You never probably experienced Stellarium in VR. It's freaking awesome. We bought it this morning and we start playing in the lab. Using my money, I asked for permission. So if you're planning to buy and start and buy a telescope, those are my 3 favorite ones. I really like 8-inch Dobsonian as a starting point. It's a really good way to start. And I really like the people from Astra NZ because they really look after you. I've been experiencing really nasty people and really good people. They are the good one. There are other people that they sell telescope, but they are dead. I'm Italian. Skywatcher, you can find them new or second hands. It's not that difficult to find a Dobsonian 8-inch on TradeMe or on Facebook. And the price range for a second hand will be between 400 to 600. I wouldn't go above 600. Same for those telescopes. They go from 500 to 900. And this one is getting more expensive. So because this is a motorized and this is a much more advanced optic system, and motorized, you will see that the price tend to go up. This might reach 2,000, around 2,000 New Zealand dollar. So my advice is always to start small. If you have fun, if you see that you enjoy spending time, then you might end up upgrade and resell what you have already purchased. So you don't lose money. Even if you bought it secondhand, you can resell for the same price. Another application that I really like to use, it's this application that is for free, field view calculator. You have a telescope, you know the focal length. You put there, I'm going to use the 20 millimeters eyepiece. It tells you, it shows you what will be the size of what you're going to look at. Even if you take a picture, you want to take a picture, you put out, this is the telescope that they got. This is the camera they got, and it gives you a simulation of what the image is going to look like. So at least you plan ahead before doing things, instead of putting random camera, random eyepiece, or buy the wrong telescope. So if you know already that you want to see some few things, you can go on this tool. It's for free online, and you plan and see. Sometimes you take picture, you don't know what the hell is in the picture. This is another nice website in which you upload the picture, you process the picture, it's called plate solving, and then it tells you back, this star is this one. So it's capable to recognize and triangulate all the information that you see from the stars, and it give you all the information of what you're looking at. Another things that I haven't tried, but I really like, is Astrohopper. It seems that is this application that will allow to transform any kind of telescope in a telescope that can guide you and tell you what you're looking at. It's something that I just found it 1 year ago, but I never tested it myself. It's something that I want to test, and it's for free. It's on GitHub. That is a platform where you can go and download whatever you need. There is a bit of sad story. I got scammed. I sold one telescope last year, and I was given the screenshot that the payment was done, and then we realized that it was a fake payment, and we managed never to find who was, but whatever, it happened. I've been breaking a couple of telescopes. This is not one of them that I broke it, but I did it with a really big lens that it was 15 centimeter. I was trying to repair it and extract it, but I cracked it. It gets annoyed. It gets frustrated. But the things that found a lot of frustration is sometimes watching wrong channels on YouTube. There are a lot of people that spend time, make you think that you need to spend just because they have a lot of money to spend themselves. The only things that they do is just showing off. And I was following all of them and start deleting them because I saw that they were pushing me in a race that didn't make sense. I wasn't stopping and enjoying doing what I do. And by the way, if the picture doesn't look really cool and I like it, it's still okay. I don't care if it's not perfectly done according to the standards of some of those people. I never got an award, but I gave a bolt to someone that was starting astronomy. It was 2-3 years ago. I remember that he came to my place and Rino, I don't know what's happening. I said, come, let me see. And then I figured it out in 2 seconds that I need just a longer screw. I fixed it and I, what should I give you? Nothing, it's just a screw, it's 2 cents. After a couple of years, he won these awards. It was last year. He won these awards. But he's a Massey alumni. Yeah, go Massey. So he got these awards. I never got an award because I feel like if I send one of my picture, I feel like a break dancer sending a picture to the wrong competition. Ouch. I don't want to insult Australians. No, but there are a lot of other good meetings. This is one of the kids of one of my, her mother used to be my student. And then she discovered I was selling a telescope and she wanted to buy him a telescope. And this is him with his pictures of the solar system. If you go there, he starts giving you all the name of Betelgeuse, black holes, and he knows everything. And so they got a telescope for him. But the other things that I really play and try to do when I take pictures is not just to appreciate the beauty of nature, but also try to understand how far away they are. Carina Nebula, 7,500 light years. That means that when that light that was emitted and then arrived to my telescope, and when it was emitted, we were just having the first farming community in the world. We didn't even have the pyramids. So the light has been there traveling towards us for so long, and we have the luck to capture it and show this beauty. And you can play with any kind of nebula. You see, 1,500 years ago. So the Roman Empire was still there, but split in half. They start splitting the properties. Pleiades or Matariki. Whenever you see it, it's sistine around the time the Sistine Chapel was completed by Michelangelo. And the light is now reaching us. 2.5 million, this is Andromeda, 2.5 million years ago. Humans were not even there. Or the moon, it's 1 second in delay. So whenever we see the moon, it's like in a blink of eyes, it could disappear and you won't even realize. So I'm also proud because we are doing a lot of work at Massey to preserve this beauty. Thanks to Susan that is here. We did a symposium last week or 2 weeks ago, try to put together awareness that we need to preserve that because light pollution is something that we are creating. And regardless, the beauty about light pollution is like not like CO2 that you need to do a lot of action to take it. Switching off the lights and it's gone. It's much easier to tackle. Or someone has the remote of all the transportation things, he can turn it off from his office. So we already managed to create a lot of science on that. This is one of the first paper that Susan wrote. And there it is. And it's a way to put together to show all the way we can measure light pollution. And she's trying to do a beautiful work, try to standardize. And by the way, using also astronomy tools, astrophotography tools to measure light pollution. So we can have a more efficient way to measure it without spending too much money. And so it's some of the things I'm proud. I'm not working at NASA, but we still are doing something cool here. But one day I'm gonna go there. Thank you so much.